9.1% in fractions. We should be on page 415 in our books. Books open, please, to page 415. All right. In example 1, we're dealing with writing percents as fractions. All right. Now, just a little bit of background here. Anytime we have a percentage, we know that that percentage is out of 100. So if I say there's a 50% chance of it raining today, that means 50% chance out of 100%. Okay? 50-50, 1 and 2. All right, so how do I write this as a fraction? I write the percentage over 100. Okay, so it's going to be 37 over 100. Then I need to consider, can I simplify my fraction? Could you simplify 37 over 100?
No.
No, you can't. So it's going to be the final answer. Now, 50%. In this case, I would write it 50 over 100. And in this case, I can reduce it to what?
1/2.
1/2. Okay, and that would be my final answer. Anytime you're writing percents as fractions, you want to reduce to simplest form. All right, so it's basically just write it over that number over 100 and reduce it where possible. You should be taking notes. You should see pencil markings on your notes. Make sure you're writing these down. All right, now in example 2, we're flip-flopping it. Now we're writing fractions as percents. I realize that I've given you 2 fractions that you may have already memorized what the percent is. Okay? I understand that. At the same time, I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as maybe if it was a little bit of a more difficult fraction. So you ask yourself, what number do I need to multiply my denominator by to get to 100? It has to be over 100 because a percentage is basically a portion of the 100. So I can't just start with my initial fraction and say, oh, well, that's 4%. Well, it's not 4%. I have to actually have that over 100. So 5 times what equals 100? 20. And then 4 times 20 is 80. So I know that this fraction is equivalent to 80%. Okay? 80%. Like I said, this is a more simple fraction. You might already just know that 4/5 equals 80%. But if I asked you what percentage is equal to 1/7, that would be a little more complicated. First of all, because 7 doesn't go into 100 evenly. All right? So it's important that you understand the process, okay, so that you can figure out the more difficult ones later. All right, now we're going to do the same thing to B. 4 times what number gives me 100? 25. 4 quarters in 100, right? And then 3 times 25 is? 75. So 3 quarters is equivalent to 75%. Now, this might look familiar to you, okay, because we're kind of finding a missing link between our denominator and the 100. Because in order to find out a true percentage, it has to be over 100. It has to be out of 100. Okay, so we're finding that missing link, kind of like what we did with equivalent ratios in our proportions last chapter. All right, so that's how you would write a fraction as a percent. Okay, now in example 3, we're finding the percent of a number. Okay, so what is 60% of 75? What's 35% of 90? What's 40% of 150? All right, now, there are several ways that you can solve this. I'm going to show you one way, okay? Now, if you know a different way and you'd like to raise your hand and just ask me to work through it with you, I can see if that's a correct way to solve it. But just for consistency reasons, I'm going to just show you this one way first, okay? What is 60% of 75? Well, I know that 60% can be written as a fraction. How? How can I write 60% as a fraction? JT?
Could you use 60 over 100?
60 over 100. So now in your calculators, divide 60 divided by 100 in your calculators. Okay? Equals what? 0.6. Okay, 0.6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the percentage to a decimal, and then I'm going to multiply it by the whole. Okay, in this case it would be 75. So what's 0.6 times 75? And that would be my answer. So 45 is 60% of 75. All right, that is the number that would be 60% of 75. So what do? We converted our percentage to a decimal. Now, I showed you the work here, basically 60 over 100. But what did I basically do? All I did was I moved my decimal left 2 places. That's all I did. Okay, so 35% as a decimal would be what? Point what? 0.35. 40% as a decimal would be 0.4. 53% as a decimal would be, class? 0.53. I'm basically just moving my decimal left 2 places. Okay, so now on B, all right, I don't have to write it as a fraction. That's understood. I can do 0.35 times 90. Okay, and I want you to show this step of your work tonight in your homework, okay? I want to make sure that you're converting to a decimal accurately, and then you're finding your answer. And what is 0.35 times 90?
31.5.
Very good, 31.5. And that would be my answer. That 31.5, if I asked you what's 35% of 90, you would say 31.5. 31.5. Now, on C, same thing. 40% of 150, so what's 40% as a decimal? 0.4. I multiply that by my total, which is 150. And what's 0.4 times 150? What is it? It is, let me just double check, 0.4 times, yep, it is 60. Okay, so finding the percent of a number. Last but not least, example 4. Now, the first 3 examples are basically just computation. Can you convert a fraction to a percent to a fraction? Now let's apply this concept. On page 415, we're given a tennis example. All right, so read along with me on page 415. It says, in October of 2001, 16 of the top 100 women's tennis players were from the U.S. Okay, so what percentage is that? It's 16%. Now it says what percent of the players were not from the U.S. Okay, so I know that 100% is my total, right? 100% is going to cover the total players that are in this tennis league. Okay, and what percentage of those were from the U.S.? Did they say 16%? So I can subtract that from 100 to get the total percentage of players not from the U.S. Okay, so we're just using a little bit of reasoning here to figure out what the problem is asking us to solve for. On number 40 on your homework tonight, you're going to see a little bit of that application as well. Okay, so it's not going to be super difficult, but it is going to require you to apply what you're learning in 9.1. If you understand all of that, you know what you need to know for 9.1.